The hot African sun beat relentlessly on the land, turning the horizon into a shimmering mirage. The air was thick with the scent of dust and earth, heavy with the weight of history. Far away in the heart of the Sahel, the country of Burkina, Faso stood tall, battered yet resolute under the leadership of its president, Ibrahim Traoré. His rise had been swift, powerful, and controversial, but his heart was even fiercer. Beneath the weight of his position, a storm brewed, one that would shake the continent itself. That morning, a letter arrived, delivered by a trusted messenger, one the president knew all too well. As the thick parchment was unrolled, Traoré read the words aloud to himself. Yet the letters were sharp, almost cutting through the air. The kings of Africa have spoken. You are advised to bow to authority and preserve the peace. Disobedience will lead to grave consequences. The warning was clear. The kings of Africa, those titans of power, had sent their ultimatum, urging Traoré to fall in line, to submit to their collective will. Their influence stretched across the continent. Defying them meant more than just risking political backlash. It was a challenge to the very fabric of Africa's leadership. But Traoré, fierce and unyielding, did not flinch. His jaw tightened, his chest rising with defiance. He had come this far not by bowing to the past, but by shaping the future. He would not be swayed. He knew this moment was the test of his life. What happened next would not just determine the course of his presidency, would determine the course of Africa's future. As the afternoon sun bathed the city in golden light, Traoré stood on the balcony of his office, looking out over the capital. The bustling streets below were filled with the sounds of life cars honking, people talking, the distant hum of the markets. But to him, it was all a blur, his mind racing, caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. How could he follow the path the kings demanded? How could he submit to a system that had for too long held Africa back, dividing nations, perpetuating weakness? He turned to his trusted advisor, Commander Alou, who stood in the corner of the room, watching him carefully. The man's face was set, his brow furrowed with concern. The weight of the moment pressed down on them both. President Alou said, "Softly, I've heard the whispers. Well, the kings have summoned you. They demand your obedience. If you refuse, the consequences will be severe. I fear the repercussions could tear us apart." Traoré looked at his advisor, his expression unreadable. The words hung heavy in the air between them. "The kings are afraid," he replied calmly, though his voice was tinged with an edge of determination. "They are afraid of what we stand for, afraid that their time is coming to an end." Lou hesitated, but his loyalty to the president was unwavering. "What do you intend to do?" "I will answer their call," Traoré said, his voice steady, "but I will do so on my own terms." The challenge was clear. Kings of Africa had ruled with an iron grip for too long, and now they sought to remind the world of their dominance. But Traoré knew that their power was fading. He had already proven that he could stand against the tides of history. It had already changed the course of his country's future. But to defy the kings was a gamble, one that could either forge a new era for Africa or destroy everything he had worked for. As dusk settled over the land, Traoré made his decision. He would not bow. He would not bend. He would rise. The next day the call came. It was the summons from the kings. The grand meeting was to take place in an ancient palace, a place where Africa's history was woven into every stone and wall. The kings of the continent were gathered there, powerful, proud, and unyielding. Their faces were as stern as their decrees, their words as heavy as the thrones they sat upon. As Traoré entered the grand hall, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The room was filled with the quiet rustle of robes and the murmurs of power. Each king represented a different part of Africa, their influence and strength unmatched. The hall was draped in rich fabrics, gold accents glittering in the light, but despite the opulence, Traoré felt an overwhelming sense of coldness. Stood tall in the center of the room, his posture straight, his eyes unwavering, he could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. The kings were not accustomed to being challenged. They were used to rulers who bent to their will, politicians who cowered in their presence. But Traoré was different. He was not like the others. He was a man of action, of change. And in that moment, he realized that the future of Africa rested. On his shoulders, the head of the council, King Mahat, rose from his throne, his presence commanding the room. His voice was deep, rich with the authority of his position. "President Traore," he said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the young leader, "you have been warned. You are to join us in preserving the peace. Your defiance has threatened the delicate balance we have maintained for years. If you refuse, the consequences will be severe." The other kings remained silent, watching Traore carefully. The weight of their gazes felt suffocating, but the president stood unshaken. He had fought too hard to get to this point to back down. "Now, I will not bow to you," Traore declared, his voice clear, steady, and filled with the strength of his conviction. "I will not follow your rules. I have fought for the future of this continent, for the future of its people. I will not let your fear of change hold us back. If Africa is to rise, it must rise on its own terms." The room fell silent. Shock rippled through the gathered kings, their faces a mix of disbelief and outrage. But Traore stood firm, refusing to flinch. Then, from the back of the room, a voice interrupted the tense silence. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but it carried with it the weight of wisdom. King Zuri of the South, known for his calm and measured approach, stood up. He had been one of the kings who had initially opposed Traore, but now his words took everyone by surprise. "Traore speaks the truth," King Zuri said, his voice steady, but filled with the power of someone who had seen the cost of complacency. "Africa has been shackled for too long. We have been ruled by fear, by division, and it has crippled us. It is time for a new vision, one that is not bound by the past, but shaped by the future. The time for change is now." One by one, the other kings began to rise. At first hesitantly, then with growing conviction. King Tarek from the east, once an ardent opponent, spoke next. "Perhaps we have been blind to the possibilities of what Africa can become. We have feared what we do not understand. It is time we recognize the strength that comes from unity, not division." A quiet ripple spread through the room as more kings nodded in agreement. It became clear that the unity Traore had sought was no longer just his vision, it was becoming a reality for Africa. His defiance had sparked a transformation, not just in the kings who sat before him, but in the very heart of the continent itself. The moment came when the final word was spoken, the weight of it carrying the future of Africa with it. King Manat, the most powerful of the kings, stood. His eyes met Traore's, and for the first time there was a flicker of respect in them. "You have one, Ibrahim," he said, his voice grave but acknowledging. "Your vision for Africa is not one of defiance, but of progress. You have shown us what we have been afraid to see. Perhaps it is not defiance we should fear, but complacency." The kings of Africa stood united, not as rulers over nations, but as leaders of a continent on the brink of something greater. Traore looked out over the room, his heart swelling with pride. This was not just his victory, it was Africa's victory. Victory for every man, woman, and child who dared to dream of a better tomorrow. As the conference came to a close, the once divided kings walked out of the palace together. Their differences no longer a barrier, but a strength. The tension that had once threatened to tear the continent apart had been replaced by a shared vision, a shared dream of unity and progress. Back in the heart of Burkina Faso, Traore stood on the balcony once more, looking out over the city. The night had fallen, and the stars above were bright, a symbol of the promise that now lay ahead. The land once barren now seemed full of potential. The winds of change had swept across the continent, and nothing would ever be the same again. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing for more inspiring tales of hope, healing, and unexpected kindness. Hit the like button and share this with someone who needs it today.